Yes, good morning and welcome. You're still watching Daybreak right here on Citizen TV. We continue with the show. That's a hashtag to use, Daybreak. It is time to take a look at the issues behind the headlines. This morning, very interesting headlines. CS in shouting match with MP over Raila remarks. That's on the top strip of the Standard this morning. How you'll raise 118 billion shillings for Uhuru project. This has to do with the housing project. Remember, housing, cheap housing, affordable housing is one of the big four agenda. Pills are turning you into an addict. That's the front page of the Daily Nation. And of course, that picture of that Shell petrol station along Ring Road, Kileleshwa, that was demolished yesterday. That similar demolitions will be happening today. And of course, Wahiga Mora will be hosting the NEMA Director General later on in the show. Do stand by for that big interview. President Uhuru Kenyatta is set to travel to the US later this month for a meeting with US President Donald Trump. It's also highlighted on the front page of the Daily Nation. This morning for our news review, we are privileged to have, let me start on my right, Dismas Mokua, political analyst. Good morning, karibu sana.
Good morning.
And Anthony Oloch, MP Mathare constituency.
Thank you.
There's a lot of political headlines, and of course this one highlighted on this top strip of the Standard, where a member of the National Assembly got into a shouting match with a CS, Rashida Chesa, CS in charge of sports. The story is on page 9, and probably we could start from there. Of course, this emanating from the comments attributed to CS Rashida Chesa coming from the weekend. With regard to Raila Odinga, his role in the handshake, in what many people are saying was going to be a cabinet reshuffle. State House has already denied the existence of any looming cabinet reshuffle. But do you think members of Parliament, members of the Senate, politicians in general should really engage Rashida Chesa at this point with regard to what he said about Raila Odinga at the weekend? Because he was really an angry man in whatever he said, whether or not it was true. State House has already said there's no looming cabinet reshuffle. Should this thing really continue? Should MPs even try to confront the CS?
Well, for me, I think it's really bad manners for a cabinet secretary and an MP to engage in this kind of an altercation. The Kenyans expect that if our leaders are going to engage in any verbal argument, it's about how we are supposed to be growing our economy, how we are supposed to be achieving the Big Four agenda, for instance, how we are supposed to be attaining our food security, not altercation over a man. I mean, when you see two men in altercation over another man, then you begin to wonder, as a nation, are we going to be making progress? And for Chesa, he must be knowing that the appointing authority today for the cabinet is President Uhuru Kenyatta. It's not Raila Odinga. So in essence, he's telling Kenyans that he has no confidence in the ability of his party leader, President Uhuru Kenyatta, to lead the nation, that Kenyatta takes advice from Raila Odinga. And you know, this is really unacceptable. And that's the kind of propaganda we do not need in our villages, in our funerals. Because you see now folks in Western Kenya, for some reason, if Chesa is dropped out of the cabinet, then they'll blame Raila Odinga. And in my view, what Chesa should be focusing on is how we're going to take Kenya to the World Cup in the next 4 years. Now, if those MPs are the VIP facilities at Kisumu Airport, were in altercation that how are you going to take Kenya to the World Cup, then would be breaking into a dance and song. Yes. But now they're fighting over tribal politics, which is unacceptable. And you know, in a mature democracy, like say the US or the UK, Chesa would have resigned. You recall in the UK, a minister went to the House of Commons late by 5 minutes and he resigned. But now you have a cabinet secretary who's been appointed. Instead of spending his time in Nairobi trying to build sports, you know, Kenya is a sporting nation. We've got many people who would like to take their skills to the next level. Artist, he spends all his time in the village, in funerals, engaging in shadow boxing. Yes. I really find unacceptable. And I noticed one of the MPs from Amani National Congress, Osoti, says they're likely to maybe pass a vote of no confidence or impeach him. In my view, they should make good progress because among all the cabinet secretaries, he's the only one whose output we do not know.
Really? But is that the kind of, rather the brand of politics we should be playing in 2018, where MPs and CSs are engaging in fist fights at an airport in public, where we're talking about even impeaching a CS simply because he spoke or he said one thing or the other with regard to my party leader? Is that the brand of politics we should be playing at this time?
Both incidences were unfortunate. I think the Leadership and Integrity Act requires that, you know, people carry themselves in a manner that brings dignity and respect the office. You remember there was a DCJ, Deputy Chief Justice, the first that we had after the 2010 Constitution. She made a statement and pinched somebody's nose and said, you know, you should know people. And for that reason, she had to go home. And people looking back were saying, are we applying double standards? Because we've seen men politicians do worse things and have not gone home. Last week or the other week, Balala, in open TV, the glare of the public, said, you know, people can go to hell. He tried to explain it off, but, you know, if this was the time of the former Deputy Chief Justice, Balala should have gone home. Echesa, I think Echesa is trying to apply, in my view, what I call the Mao template. In 2013, you saw people trying to use the name of the former Prime Minister for political reasons, and especially in respect of his perceived role in evicting people from the Mao. Murkomen has come with similar unfortunate statements that you cannot explain. How do you explain somebody who is not in cabinet being said so-and-so is the one responsible for eviction? Raila does not wield the instruments of power. He does not sit in cabinet. And I think the statements by Chesa fall in the same shameful place.
Okay.
The role of reshuffling the cabinet appointment and dismissal rests with the president. And so I think Echesa, and I agree with Mokua, Echesa should be spending less time in funerals, less time politicking. He's not a politician. Instead, you see him more in funeral and other things. He should be spending time. You see, Kenya's athletics team came back, I think, yesterday. They have 19 medals. He should be telling us, what are we going to do more to try and encourage these people?
Yes.
How do we get more medals in the Ninis to come? How do we get more sports academies? My good friend Osotsi put a motion recently saying, and I think he's doing a draft amendment, let's have sports talent academies in every constituency. I think it was in 2013 when the Jubilee government said they'll build X number of stadia. He should be going through this and giving us a policy statement. What is the policy statement or position he has about one of the big four, creating 1.3 million manufacturing jobs, especially for the youths? There is lots and lots of stuff, and when you look at how he landed in cabinet, I was saying this yesterday, that it was a big up for the president to be able to give a chance to an ordinary Kenyan without any known academic credentials, but saying, you know, everybody deserves a chance. And Parliament, we did pass that name. So he should be trying very hard to justify his appointment and making the president proud today.
But I think we're focusing too much on CS Rashid Echesa. In this altercation, there was another MP involved. It wasn't just the CS alone, Sama Tandi, both leaders at their own different levels, but because you mentioned something to do with ethics and integrity. This brand of leadership, this conduct of leaders that we see, because back in the day, we used to hear about one MP and the other getting into an altercation inside parliament buildings, fighting inside the toilets. That really disappeared after a while. But we are seeing a re-emergence of this kind of conduct by politicians. Remember, this is in a year when the conduct of even members of the National Assembly has really been put into question, how they conduct themselves even in committees as they probe different issues. It means there's a problem in our leadership across board, don't you think?
Yes, and both are guilty, the cabinet secretary as well as the MP, because as Anton has indicated, they do not bring honor to the offices they are holding. And these are supposed to be our role models. So when the Kenyan youth aspire to be a cabinet secretary, and the person they see holding that office is behaving in a manner which is not consistent with the best practices, then they begin to wonder. In fact, they say, this is the template, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So little wonder then that if you go to high schools, colleges, people are behaving in these cantankerous, unacceptable manner, because they are saying, if a cabinet secretary behaves like this and then is given a pat on the back, then who am I? And even for the Honorable Atandi, he needs to ask himself several questions. In as much as he may want to position himself as, you know, I think there's some sort of, there's a level of sycophancy. And in some parts of the nation, if you are seen to be more loyal to your party leader, then it guarantees another election win. So I suspect that's what Atandi is doing. Probably Atandi was not even genuine in his altercation with the chaser, but he wanted us to have this kind of discussion so that the voters back in the village are able to see, yes,
do you think that is how he came out between the two men, that now Sam Matandi comes out as the real defender of Raila Odinga?
I can easily bet my head that next time Matandi goes back to the village,
he's a hero now.
He's going to get a red carpet, because people will say, we like you, you are fighting for Baba's interest. And for him, I mean, I get the opportunity of interacting with these honorable members. After that altercation, he must have received so many phone calls, or made phone calls to his mates.
Congratulate him and applaud him and tell him you did a good job?
No, I mean, probably he's asking his villagers, have you seen what I did for Baba? And it's giving him many more votes.
You are also a member of the ODM party. Do you feel the need to defend Raila Odinga, your party leader, in this way, in this manner?
Maybe the manner of doing it.
If at all you came across CS Rashid Echesa today, the statement he made is public. You know what he said.
I would have engaged him in a more civil discussion, perhaps more restrained. I have done so in other forums, and looking at what both did, because I'm told they were both shouting, I think it was a bit dishonorable, but I don't want to pass judgment on them. Maybe I would do it differently. Maybe I'll do it differently myself.
Actually, for me, the expectation is that for the Honorable Atandi, he should have given it a white bath. Because Echesa wants to create this impression that Raila Odinga wants him out of the cabinet. And he's made a statement in a funeral. And believe you me, it did not just come from the blue heavens when he made that statement. So for him, he's achieving the intended objective. So for Atandi to create this kind of a fuss, it's keeping him in the news for the good reason. So probably Atandi should have just ignored it, given it a white bath. And
when Sam Atandi, CS Rashid Echesa made the comments he made at the weekend, of course he was referring to the looming cabinet reshuffle. State House yesterday came out and said there's no such reshuffle. I'm quoting State House spokesperson, Kanzedena, who addressed a press briefing yesterday in Mombasa. He said, talk of looming cabinet shuffle unfounded. Do you believe that there's nothing cooking, and as far as a rearrangement of the cabinet is concerned? We've been talking over and over. Does this denial that's carried in the media today change your mind about that?
Well, you know, a long time ago when we were growing up and President Moi would do his reshuffle, it would be during the 1 o'clock bulletin. So people wouldn't even wait for a reshuffle. And there's been this conversation that there's a reshuffle, you know, on its way. The fact that State House has denied that there's no reshuffle, in fact, that's a confirmation that there's supposed to be a reshuffle. Now, what they haven't told us is why the reshuffle didn't take place. And because Jubilee essentially is made up of the president and his deputy, there's a very high probability that they've not agreed on which path to take, whether they need to fire a number of cabinet secretaries who are supposed to be coming on board. And that statement, in my view, that's what it's supposed to be covering. Because, I mean, you cannot alert the entire nation and tell us you're going to have a news conference 3:30 for you to merely tell us that President Kenyatta is going to meet with Donald Trump. No way.
Yes.
No way.
The statement was already out and the media would have carried it anyway.
The statement was out, and I would imagine that for the State House communications, you need to weigh the kind of statement you're going to issue and the weight to attach. You cannot keep the entire nation under suspense for hours on end, only to tell us what you've already seen from...
Do you think, for example, there was to be an announcement, then something changed at the last minute?
That probability does exist. And in my view, there was a lot of conversations, and chances are that the president and his deputy are not agreed on how to do the reshuffle, or how to move people, how to fire folks. And they said, let's buy time. When you look at the body language of Kanzedena, she was not convincing that in fact that's the announcement she wanted to make. I mean, this is the kind of announcement which goes out on Twitter, or you send a news release. You keep the entire nation waiting, and then you tell us President Kenyatta is going to the US.
At the end of this month.
Yeah, no way. This is a confirmation that there is a power play, that probably the president and his deputy are not singing from the same hymn book.
Yes. Given the kind of statements that CS Echesa made at the weekend with regard to his own position in the cabinet, and the kind of anxiety and expectation that was there yesterday, do you really think that Raila Odinga has a lot to do with anything in that cabinet, if at all there will be any reshuffle?
My view is that we must look at Rashid's statement and that of the media as somebody somewhere trying to set the agenda or trying to prod. Somebody is expecting that some reshuffle is coming, and maybe justifiably so. because against the background of the handshake, there was expectations that, you know, a lot of things would change. There is the perceived hand of Raila being consulted, rightly or wrongly, that perhaps rather than the deputy president, the president would run to Raila on what do you think about this issue, and then to the former president. So those expectations and the contested election, the background of the contested election, there's been talk, rightly or wrongly, that there was need to put the government together and to try and settle things. But I think somebody somewhere, and I think the media is also playing up this, because when you say that keeping the nation waiting, well, that presupposes that somebody had said, I am going to do this, and I don't think anybody had made that expectation. It's in our imagination, it's in the media, and people are trying to put dots together. I don't think the president or Raila or State House has given any indication that we are about to reshuffle cabinet.
But were you convinced by the kind of communication that came out of State House yesterday? Did it require a press conference for that?
It's subject to interpretation. I mean, if Danze wants to do it by way of a tweet, or she wants to make it. But you see, the response also is commensurate to the degree of expectation, because people put too much weight of expectation.
But even listening to CS Chesa,
it's also possible.
Yes.
It's also possible that if there was a reshuffle, then somebody tried to forestall it by sending Rashid to speak. So that now, if it did happen, they would be saying, you see, and it's what Mokua is saying.
Because quite a number of CSs have been mentioned in the last few weeks, some of them because of probes, different corruption-related investigations ongoing, both in Parliament and through the DCI, through the ESCC. Quite a number of CSs have been named. Some of them, we know their names. Those who've been, who've had to appear before parliamentary committees. None of them have spoken about any pending or looming cabinet reshuffle. Then CSHS appears and says, oh, if you can sack me, who's appointing authority, all those things seemingly directed at a looming cabinet reshuffle. Should we really ignore the statements by CSHS?
No, we cannot ignore that statement, because HSA is not your normal Kenyan. He sits at a privileged position and he has access to privileged information. So when he shouts that there's a fire somewhere, you must take him seriously. And then number two, is there really a need for a reshuffle today, or for people to be hired, fired? One would easily say yes. Starting from the Treasury. You know, for the longest time, President Mwai Kibaki kept the IMF at bay. But right now, Kenya is going back to the IMF with a begging bowl, looking for resources, meaning that our monetary and fiscal leadership has been put into question. I saw a letter on the IMF website to the effect that our Treasury is about to bend backwards to accommodate whatever IMF wants. And you've seen this in the increase of the cost of power. We understand that our dollar may easily lose to the, or rather, the Kenyan shilling may easily lose to the dollar. And you are seeing the cost of fuel going up every day, meaning that there is a crisis at the National Treasury. So is there a cause for reshuffle? Yes. Then we go back to the sugar report. And the Honorable Watch have been debating these. 3 cabinet secretaries have been mentioned for acts of either omission or commission. The members of the National Assembly are suggesting that they do not have faith in that leadership. So is there a reason for a reshuffle? Yes. So when we are told that the president is going to make an announcement coming from Khartoum, then there's a valid expectation that that's what we are waiting for. And as a practitioner of communications, there's that valid expectation that do not create unnecessary suspense. Tell us that you're going to make an announcement when it's really heavy.
Yes.
I mean, can you imagine the resources the Kenyan newsrooms or media houses spent at State House waiting for a statement which would have come out on Twitter?
In fact, it had already been shared, even on email, that the fact that the president will be traveling to the US. So the need for another press briefing in the afternoon does not really occur. But do you agree, do you concur with the Honorable Oloch that the media is playing up this thing? That probably this whole talk about a cabinet reshuffle is just to do with headlines and nothing really tangible from State House?
You know, the media is referred to as the fourth estate. And when everything else fails, we go back to the media and blame the media. The media is merely reporting. I mean, it's not a journalist who told Lechesa, go and complain that you're about to be fired by Raila Odinga. Never mind, Raila Odinga is not the appointing authority. So it's not the media who told him to say that. So when Lechesa says that I'm likely to be fired because of Raila Odinga, then it's the duty of the journalist to report that. So the fourth estate merely covers what is happening. If it gets a very good prominence, like for instance, you've got this demolition here on the Pejuana in the Nation. The media is merely covering what happened. If there was no demolition, the media would not cover it. And I think it's important for our leaders, especially the people in these sensitive positions, not to make statements that can make anybody nervous. But if they make the statements and they're covered, then they should carry the burden which comes with that.
Yes, and coming even from that sugar debate, and seeing this featured on the dailies this morning, because there's talk about that debate, that report being doctored because cabinet secretaries had been mentioned adversely, and the recommendation initially was that they should be held culpable. And that would have had consequences in as far, if at all, there would be a reshuffle. There are claims that that has been doctored so that to actually remove the fact that they've been held culpable, the culpability on the CSs, probably in an attempt to save their jobs. Don't you think that even the National Assembly is also in a way anticipating a cabinet reshuffle of some sort?
The National Assembly is not anticipating, but I think there is a real founded fear that if some people are found culpable, and it's not only on the sugar issue, it's on the land issue itself. You saw how Amina and Matiangi were talking at 6s and 7s. Never mind that they both sit in the same cabinet. If there was collective responsibility, both of them should have been held collectively responsible for this. So yes, by the two reports on the investigations that are going on, the stage has been set, and the expectation in the public there is that some people should go. I mean, in the issuance of licenses for the sugar importation, certainly the CS, Rotich, has some questions to answer. In respect of how we manage our internal affairs, especially in terms of the industrialization ministry, I think there is some capability also that arose out of that. And then coming from the statement of Rashid himself, what I think would be unfortunate would be that Parliament would be used to rubber stamp or to excuse some people. Because at the very beginning, Kanini Kega and I think his co-chair initially gave a report that Parliament wasn't very happy about. And then they seemed to have gathered some steam and read the public mood, and a lot of things came in place that seems to point to the directions that some people must take responsibility. If they do bring up a watered down report, it is very possible that Parliament could still send them back. You remember there are two incidences when I think, though in the reverse, I think Mutudo, there was a report that indicted him and said he was not fit to hold office that he was appointed to. Then Parliament reversed that. If these people come up with a made-up report in which they seem to be excusing these people, it's very possible that on the floor of the House we could amend and still find them.
Do you think Parliament could be used to actually excuse some of these CSs? Because if at all they're held responsibly, maybe there will be some level of pressure on the President not to appoint them or to move them to other ministries. But if at all that is not contained in that report, don't you think that that will be tantamount to actually sanitizing even wrongdoing?
It has happened many times before. I will not be shocked. It would be very unfortunate, but I think a few voices will speak out, and I hope that the majority will be able to throw back that report at them. And there was a suggestion earlier, and I wish the Speaker and members would have adopted it, that rather than have these two committees, we should have had a select committee that perhaps has more bipartisanship, more open-mindedness in terms of the way they investigate. Maybe we should have gone the way of the select committee, and then you remember the Speaker has given certain directions about how we behave with the people we investigate. And so when you see this kind of body language, hugging and taking selfie things, you cannot run away from the possibility that some pressure has been applied. But now when we investigate people, I've seen a bit of changes. Yesterday we were talking to Bob Collimo about the question of dominance and players in the telcos industry and how this impacts on the common mwananchi. And there is nothing like seeing anybody off or exchanging a handshake. You finish and you're told Sergeant Atam will see you off. And I think that's the way we need to be able to do it. But it will be unfortunate if they water down and excuse some people.
Do you think that any attempt to water down that report, the sugar report I'm talking about, that has indicted some CSs, that probably it's also a reaction to this expectation that there's a looming cabinet reshuffle, that people are feeling that if at all I'm a CS and I'm actually adversely named, or even parliamentarians are feeling if we adversely mention this CS, then it will affect their job?
Well, that is the case. But maybe the larger picture is, why is the public interest in this conversation? The information already available in the public domain from the investigations by these two committees, even before they compiled the report, points to one direction. That these three cabinet secretaries took decisions which were not serving the public interest. And here the public interest begins from the sugarcane farmers. That the sugarcane farmers have got an expectation that somebody is going to be driving their selfish interest. But this one has not happened, and that's something which needs to be addressed. Then number two, how do you just create an opportunity for people to bring sugar without taking care of the sugar millers in Kenya? I think those are the two big issues. And if there's a cabinet secretary who has not lived to that, then obviously needs to go home. Okay.
Time now for a break. And after the break, of course, we'll be looking at other headlines. I've seen one very interesting one here about ODM's involvement in what is happening in Zimbabwe. And I don't know why. But yes, ODM entangled in Zimbabwe crisis. Party strategist conveyed Raila Odinga's goodwill message to opposition. Party's associates accused of fueling post-election violence in Harare. We'll be discussing that and a lot more headlines after the break.